The stars have been silent for 300 years. Not the peaceful silence of empty space, but the terrible quiet that comes when every voice has been crushed into submission. The Krell Dominion had spread across the galaxy like a dark shadow, and wherever their ships appeared, freedom died. Governor Una stood at the window of the orbital station above. Velen Prime. She was a woman of 42 years, with tired eyes and gray streaks in her black hair. Behind her, the control room buzzed with frightened voices. Officers ran from console to console. Alarms blinked red across every screen. "How many ships?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook slightly at her sides. Lieutenant Taiho, her young aide, swallowed hard before answering. 212, Governor. The entire Third Fleet of the Krell Dominion. Admiral Varth himself commands them. Una closed her eyes. Admiral Varth, the butcher of Helios, the destroyer of the singing people. He had personally overseen the death of 47 civilizations. Entire species existed now only in history books because of that monster. "How long do we have?" she asked. 4 hours until they reach weapons range. 4 hours. 4 hours to say goodbye to everything. To the 8 million people on the planet below. To the 300,000 refugees crowded into the orbital station. To hope itself. Una turned to face her staff. They were all looking at her, waiting for orders. Some were young, barely out of training. Others had served with her for decades. All of them knew the truth. There would be no rescue, no miracle. The Krell had taught the galaxy a simple lesson over 3 centuries. Those who resist are destroyed. Those who surrender are enslaved. Either way, the Krell always won. "Send one final distress signal," Una ordered. "On all frequencies. Let the galaxy know what happens here today." Taiho hesitated. "Governor, no one will come. The Trade Federation refused our call. The Vellani Collective said they cannot risk war. Even I know." Una's voice was soft. "But history should remember. Someone should remember that we called for help, even if no help came." The young lieutenant nodded and turned to his console. His fingers moved across the controls, sending their desperate plea into the void. A cry for help that everyone would hear, and no one would answer. Una returned to the window. The Krell fleet was visible now, tiny points of light moving against the stars. Soon those lights would grow into massive warships, each one capable of burning cities to ash. The flagship alone was 3 kilometers long, a mountain of metal and death. "Governor," a technician's voice cut through the noise. "We're detecting a new hyperspace signature." Una's heart jumped. "One of ours?" "No, ma'am. Unknown configuration. It's emerging directly between us and the Krell fleet." Every eye in the control room turned to the main display. The hyperspace tunnel opened like a wound in reality, blue and white light spilling out. And from that light came a single ship. It was not a large ship. Perhaps 500 meters long. Nothing compared to the Krell dreadnoughts. Its hull was gray and covered with scars from old battles. It was angular and brutal, with no smooth lines or elegant curves. This was not a ship designed to look beautiful. This was a ship designed to fight. "What is that?" Taiho whispered. The computer searched its database and found nothing. Then it reached deeper into the oldest files, into the rumors and legends. Finally, it returned a result. "Terran Republic," the computer announced. "Classification, Battleship. Origin, Sol System. Species, Human. Humans." Una had heard stories. A young species from a distant arm of the galaxy. They had only been in space for 100 years. They were small, weak, short-lived. They fought among themselves constantly. The galaxy's experts had predicted they would destroy themselves within a generation. And yet here was one of their ships, positioning itself between a helpless colony and the deadliest fleet in existence. Are they insane? Someone asked. No one had an answer. On the Krell flagship, Admiral Vorath received the report with amusement. He was an old warrior, his scales gray with age, his body covered with the scars of 100 conquests. He had seen many things in his long life. Brave species, foolish species, species that fought and species that begged. In the end, they all fell the same way. One ship, he said, and his deep voice rumbled with laughter. One tiny ship against 200. These humans are even more foolish than the report suggested. His first officer, a younger Krell named Vorn, studied the human vessel on the screen. Sir, our database has very little information on human technology. Perhaps we should what? Be afraid of one ship? Vorath's laughter grew louder. No, let them watch. Let them see what happens to the people they came to save. Then we will add their little world to our collection. He settled back into his command chair, utterly confident. The Krell had never lost a battle. Not once in 300 years. Why would today be different? On the human battleship, Captain Hana stood on the bridge and studied the enemy fleet. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and steady hands. Her uniform was simple and clean, with no decorations except a small patch on her shoulder that showed Earth rising above a dark horizon. Captain, her tactical officer reported. Krell flagship is hailing us. Put it through. Admiral Vorath's face appeared on the screen. His yellow eyes glowed with contempt. Human vessel. You have entered restricted space. Surrender immediately, and I will make your deaths quick. Resist, and you will suffer before the end. Hannah did not respond right away. She looked at the Admiral's face, at the arrogance written in every line. Then she looked at Velen Prime, visible through the bridge windows. 8 million people. 300,000 refugees. Families. Children. Dreams. Admiral, she said finally, I'm going to give you one chance. Take your fleet and leave this system. Leave these people alone, and I will let you go. Silence. Then Vorath laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. You threaten me? You, with your single primitive vessel? Against the might of the Dominion? I'm not threatening you, Hana said. I'm offering you mercy. Take it or don't. But understand this. If you stay, if you try to harm these people, I will destroy your fleet. Every ship, every weapon. And I will start with yours. Her voice was calm. Her eyes never wavered. For just a moment, something flickered in Vorath's expression. Something he had not felt in a very long time. But he pushed it away. Fear was for the conquered, not for the Krell. Kill them, he ordered. Kill them all. The channel went dead. The Krell fleet began to move, and aboard the human battleship, Captain Hana turned to her crew. Battle stations, she said quietly. Let's remind the galaxy why humans should never be underestimated. The bridge of the TS Indomitable was quiet, except for the soft hum of machinery. 140 crew members moved to their stations with calm purpose. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. They had known from the day they put on the uniform that one day they might face impossible odds. That day had arrived. Commander Jiho, the tactical officer, brought up the enemy formation on the main display. 200 red dots surrounded a single blue one. The math was simple. The math said they should run. Enemy fleet is spreading into attack formation, Jiho announced. They're trying to surround us. First wave will reach weapons range in 6 minutes. Captain Hana nodded slowly. She had expected this. The Krell fought the same way they had always fought. Overwhelming numbers. Massive firepower. They crushed their enemies under the weight of sheer force. It had worked for 300 years, but the Krell had never fought humans before. "Helm," Hana said. "Bring us about." Heading 315. Full military power. Lieutenant Sung-woo, the helmsman, was a young man with quick hands and quicker reflexes. He had grown up racing ships through asteroid fields for fun. Now he fed power to the engines, and the Indomitable leaped forward like a hunting animal. Engineering. Status report. Chief Engineer Nari's voice came through the speaker. She was down in the heart of the ship, surrounded by the massive reactors that gave the Indomitable its power. "All systems green, Captain. Reactors at 100%. Main gun is charged and ready. We can keep this up for 8 hours before we need to rest the systems." "Understood. Keep me informed." On the orbital station above Velen Prime, Governor Yuna watched the human ship move. She did not understand what she was seeing. The vessel was accelerating toward the Krell fleet, not away from it. What are they doing? She breathed. Lieutenant Taiho shook his head. "I don't know, Governor. That's a direct attack run. They're going straight into the center of the enemy formation. That's suicide." "Yes, ma'am. It is." But the human ship kept moving, faster and faster. The gap between it and the first Krell vessels closed with frightening speed. Admiral Vorath watched from his flagship with growing irritation. This was not how Prey was supposed to behave. Prey ran. Prey hid. Prey begged for mercy. Prey did not charge directly at 200 warships. "Fire when ready," he ordered. "Destroy that ship." The first wave of Krell vessels opened fire. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Enough firepower to crack a small moon dot, and the human ship danced. There was no other word for it. The Indomitable twisted through the storm of weapons fire with impossible grace. Missiles passed within meters of its hull. Energy beams grazed its armor without finding purchase. The ship moved in ways that seemed to violate physics itself. How is that possible? Vorn, the first officer, stared at his screen in disbelief. No ship that size should be that fast. On the Indomitable's bridge, Lieutenant Minho worked the point defense systems. Streams of railgun fire reached out from the ship, intercepting missiles before they could strike. His fingers flew across the console, targeting dozens of threats simultaneously. "They're getting closer," Jiho warned. 10 seconds to weapons range. Hannah's eyes never left the display. "Main gun, target the lead destroyer. Fire when ready." The main gun of the Indomitable was not like other weapons. Most species used energy weapons, lasers, plasma, things that traveled at the speed of light but lost power over distance. Humans had taken a different approach. The main gun was a massive electromagnetic accelerator. It ran almost the entire length of the ship, and it fired physical projectiles, simple chunks of tungsten, at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The gun fired. The sound was like thunder. The entire ship shuddered, and a piece of metal the size of a small car crossed the distance to the lid. Destroyer in less than a second. The Krell ship never knew what hit it. The projectile punched through its shields as if they did not exist. It continued through the reactor core, through the ammunition storage, and out the other side. The destroyer exploded in a ball of white fire, but the projectile kept going. It had not lost much energy. It struck the second ship in line, a cruiser. That ship also exploded. 2 kills, 1 shot, Minho reported. His voice was remarkably steady. "Reload," Hana ordered. "Target the next formation." The Krell fleet was beginning to panic. Their communications filled with confused shouting. How had 1 shot destroyed 2 ships? What kind of weapon could do that? Why weren't their shields working? The answer was simple. The Krell had spent 3 centuries fighting species that used energy weapons. Their shields were designed to absorb and disperse energy. They had never faced kinetic weapons. They had never faced the brutal, simple physics of a heavy object moving very fast. The Indomitable fired again. And again. Each shot tore through Krell vessels like paper. The human ship carved a path of destruction through the enemy formation, leaving burning wreckage in its wake. "They're breaking," Jiho said. "The outer ships are trying to retreat." Admiral Vorath stared at the display in horror. 12 ships destroyed. 12, in less than 2 minutes. And the human vessel had not even been scratched. "All ships," he roared. "Concentrate fire. Target that ship. Everything we have." The remaining Krell vessels turned their weapons on the Indomitable. The sky lit up with fire. Surely nothing could survive such a storm that the Indomitable's armor held. Human engineers had spent generations developing that armor. It was a classified alloy that absorbed impacts and dispersed heat. It could take punishment that would have destroyed any other ship in the galaxy. Captain Hana felt the ship shake as weapons fire hammered against the hull. Warning lights flickered. But the armor held. It held, and the Indomitable kept fighting. "Status report," she demanded. "Minor damage to sections 4 and 7, Jiho replied. "No casualties. All weapon systems operational." Hana allowed herself a small smile. "Then keep firing." On the orbital station, Yuna had forgotten to breathe. The human ship was winning. Against 200 vessels, it was winning. Every few seconds, another Krell ship exploded. The enemy formation was falling apart. "This is impossible," Taiho whispered. "How can one ship do this?" An old officer standing nearby, a retired admiral named Dohun, who had come to Velum Prime to live his final years in peace, answered quietly. "I've studied human history," he said. "When they first reached space, everyone dismissed them. A young species, weak, divided. They had spent their entire existence fighting each other." He watched the Indomitable destroy another Krell cruiser. "We thought that made them primitive. We were wrong. It made them dangerous. While other species were learning to explore, humans were learning to fight. They have 10,000 years of warfare in their blood. They have weapons that make no sense because they were designed for a kind of brutal, close-range combat that civilized species abandoned long ago." Dohan shook his head slowly. "The Krell picked the wrong enemy today, and they are only now realizing it." On the Krell flagship, Admiral Vorath watched his fleet die. 30 ships gone, 40. The human vessel kept coming, unstoppable, relentless. His mighty armada, the terror of the galaxy, was being torn apart by a single enemy. For the first time in 300 years, Vorath felt something cold in his chest. Fear. The battle had become a nightmare for the Krell. Their formation, once a perfect wall of warships, had collapsed into chaos. Ships fled in every direction, trying to escape the human vessel that hunted them through the darkness. Captain Hana stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes tracking the movements of the enemy fleet. 53 ships destroyed. The others were scattering like frightened animals. It was almost too easy. "Captain," Commander Jiho reported, "the flagship is attempting to charge its hyperspace drive. They're trying to retreat." Hana shook her head. "Not today. Target their jump drive. Disable only. I want that ship intact." The Indomitable changed course, accelerating toward the massive Krell flagship. Enemy vessels tried to block its path. They lasted seconds. The main gun roared, and ships vanished in balls of fire. On the flagship, Admiral Vorath screamed orders at his crew. His yellow eyes were wild with a fear he had never known before. "Full power to engines. Get us out of here." "Sir, the human ship is closing too fast." "We can't. I don't want excuses. I want results." but there were no results to give. The Indomitable was faster, more agile, and far more deadly. It closed the distance like a wolf running down wounded prey. The main gun fired one more time. The shot was precise, surgical. It struck the flagship's hyperspace drive and nothing else. The massive engine exploded, sending shock waves through the ship. Lights flickered. Console sparked. The Krell flagship was crippled, stranded in normal space with no escape. Their jump drive is offline, Jiho confirmed. They're not going anywhere. Hannah nodded. All stop. Hold position. Let's see what the Admiral decides to do. The Indomitable came to rest 1,000 meters from the crippled flagship. Around them, the wreckage of the Krell fleet drifted through space. Burning hulls. Scattered debris. The remains of what had been the most feared armada in the galaxy. Governor Yuna watched from the orbital station, tears streaming down her face. She was not alone. Throughout the station, people had gathered around screens, watching the impossible unfold. They wept openly. Some dropped to their knees in gratitude. Others simply stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. 71 ships destroyed. Lieutenant Taiho reported, his voice shaking. The rest have fled or surrendered. The human ship won. One ship, Yuna whispered. One ship against 200. Old Admiral Doan stood nearby, his weathered face showing a mix of awe and something else. Respect, perhaps. Or maybe hope. They came for us, he said quietly. Strangers from across the galaxy. They heard our call and they came. On the Indomitable, the crew allowed themselves a moment of relief. They had done the impossible. They had faced overwhelming odds and won. But the battle was not over yet. Open a channel to the Krell flagship, Hana ordered. Admiral Varath's face appeared on the screen. He looked different now. The arrogance was gone. The contempt had vanished. In their place was the haunted expression of a warrior who had just learned that everything he believed was wrong. Human, he rasped. What? What are you? Hannah met his gaze without flinching. I already told you. We're humans. From Earth, a small world in a quiet corner of the galaxy that you have never bothered to visit. How? Vorath's voice cracked. How did you do this? One ship. One ship against my entire fleet. Let me explain something to you, Admiral. Hannah stepped closer to the screen. Your people have spent 300 years conquering species that never learned how to fight. Peaceful civilizations, scientists, artists, philosophers. They were no threat to you because they had evolved beyond violence. She paused. Humans are different. We crawled out of the mud of a world that was trying to kill us from the day we were born. We survived ice ages that covered half our planet. We survived diseases that killed millions. We survived each other. For 10,000 years, our greatest enemy was ourselves. Behind her, the crew of the Indomitable stood at their stations. Young and old. Men and women. All of them carrying the weight of human history in their blood. We did not conquer the stars because we were peaceful, Hana continued. We conquered them because we refused to die. Every generation faced extinction. Every generation found a way to survive. We built weapons that could destroy our own world just to deter our enemies from attacking us. We turned war into a science. We made killing into an art. Laura said nothing. He could only listen. This ship was not designed by gentle beings with dreams of exploration. It was designed by warriors who had spent millennia learning how to destroy anything that threatened them. Every system, every weapon, every piece of armor exists for one purpose: to keep fighting until the enemy is dead. Hannah's voice grew cold. Your ships were built to intimidate. Our ships were built to kill. That is why you lost today, Admiral. Not because we are stronger or smarter, because we are meaner. Because we have been fighting since we were cavemen throwing rocks at each other, and we have never, ever stopped. The bridge of the Krell flagship was silent. Officers who had served Vorath for decades stared at their commander, waiting for orders. But Vorath had no orders to give. His fleet was destroyed. His ship was crippled. His legend was shattered. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to surrender. Completely and unconditionally. You will release every species you have conquered. You will withdraw to your home system and stay there. You will never threaten another world again." Vorath's jaw tightened. "And if I refuse?" Hana smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I will finish what I started. I will destroy your flagship and everyone on it. Then I will take my ship to your home world and burn your civilization to ash. I will make the word Krell into a warning that children tell each other to scare them at night." She leaned forward. "I am being merciful right now, Admiral. Don't make me regret it." On the orbital station, Governor Yuna held her breath. This was the moment. Everything depended on what happened next. Vorath's hands trembled at his sides. He looked at the ruins of his fleet. He looked at the small, brutal human ship that had destroyed everything he had built. He thought about his home world, about his people, about the future that had once seemed so certain. 300 years of conquest. 300 years of victory. All of it ended by a single ship from a species he had dismissed as primitive. "I surrender," he said. The words tasted like poison. "I surrender completely and unconditionally." Cheers erupted across the orbital station. People embraced each other, laughing and crying at the same time. After years of fear, after generations of living under the shadow of the Krell, they were free. On the Indomitable, the crew remained professional. They had won, but there was still work to do. "Commander Jiho," Hana said, "contact Terran Command. Tell them the Krell Dominion has surrendered. We'll need ships to oversee the withdrawal and help the liberated species rebuild." "Yes, Captain." Hana turned back to the screen. Vorath still watched her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "One more thing, Admiral. You asked what we are. I want you to remember my answer. We are humans. And from this day forward, any world that asks for our protection will receive it. Any species that cries for help will be heard. The galaxy is no longer yours to terrorize." She reached for the controls to end the transmission. "Remember that. Remember it well." The screen went dark. Captain Hana finally allowed herself to take a deep breath. They had won. Against all odds, against 200 enemy vessels, they had won. But she knew this was only the beginning. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every species, every world, every station had heard the story. The Krell Dominion, the unstoppable force that had terrorized known space for 300 years, had been defeated. And not by a massive alliance or a secret weapon or divine intervention. By a single ship. One human battleship called the Indomitable. On 100 worlds, enslaved populations heard the news and began to hope. On 100 more, frightened species who had hidden from the Krell started to emerge from the shadows. The message was clear. The age of fear was ending. Captain Hana did not celebrate. There was too much work to do. The Krell flagship remained crippled in space, and thousands of enemy soldiers were still aboard. The surrender needed to be formalized. Prisoners needed to be secured. And somewhere out there, the rest of the Krell military was waiting to see what would happen next. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Velen Prime," Commander Jiho reported. "Governor Yuna requests permission to come aboard." Hana nodded. Permission granted. Prepared the main airlock. An hour later, Governor Yuna stepped onto the Indomitable for the first time. She was accompanied by Lieutenant Taiho and Old Admiral Doan. They walked through the corridors of the human ship with wide eyes, taking in every detail. The ship was not what they had expected. There were no elegant decorations, no beautiful art, no comfortable furnishings. Everything was gray metal and functional design. Wires ran along the ceilings. Pipes lined the walls. The air smelled of oil and recycled oxygen. "It's so practical," Yuna murmured. Duhan smiled slightly. "It's a warship, not a pleasure cruiser." They reached the bridge where Captain Hana waited. She was smaller than Yuna had imagined. A slender woman with tired eyes and work-worn hands. She looked like someone who had spent her entire life carrying heavy burdens. "Governor Yuna," Hana said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable." Yuna took her hand. It was a strange custom, but not unpleasant. "Captain Hana, I don't know how to thank you. You saved 8 million lives today. You saved our entire civilization. We did what needed to be done. But why?" Taiho blurted out. "Why did you come? We're nothing to you. We're strangers from the other side of the galaxy. We have nothing to offer. No resources. No strategic value. Why would you risk your ship and your lives for us?" Hannah looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to the main view screen, which showed the planet below, blue and green and beautiful. "When I was a child," she said quietly, "my grandmother used to tell me stories. Old stories from Earth, about heroes who stood up when no one else would. About people who ran toward danger instead of away from it." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Humans have done terrible things to each other. Wars, genocide, cruelty beyond imagination. Our history is written in blood. But my grandmother believed that we could be better. That somewhere inside us, there was something good. Something worth fighting for." Hannah turned back to face her guests. "When we heard your distress call, we were 3 days away at maximum speed. Our orders were to patrol the outer sectors, not to engage superior forces. Every tactical manual, every regulation, every piece of common sense told us to stay away. And why didn't you?" "Because we heard children crying." Hannah's voice cracked slightly. "In your transmission, in the background. We heard children crying, and we couldn't just ignore that. We couldn't pretend we didn't know." Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. Those children had been refugee families, huddled in the emergency shelters, waiting for the end. "The Terran Republic believes in something," Hana continued. "We believe that civilization means protecting the innocent. That strength without compassion is just another form of tyranny. The Krell had power, but they used it to enslave and destroy. We have power too, but we try to use it differently." She smiled, a genuine smile this time. "We came because you needed help. That's all. No hidden agenda. No political calculation. Just basic decency." Doan stepped forward. The old admiral had seen many things in his long life, but this was something new. A powerful species that fought for strangers, that risked everything for people they had never met. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we rebuild," Hana answered. "The Krell Dominion is finished. Their fleet is destroyed, and their admiral has surrendered unconditionally. But there are still thousands of worlds that need help. Populations that need to be freed. Governments that need to be restored. It will take years, maybe decades. Will humans lead this effort?" Hannah shook her head. "No, we'll help, but we won't rule. The freed species should govern themselves. That's the whole point. We didn't fight the Krell just to replace them with ourselves." She gestured toward the view screen. "We've already sent word to Terran Command. They're dispatching humanitarian ships, medical supplies, food, engineers, diplomats, everything needed to help the transition. But the decisions will belong to the people who live here. You will decide your own future. Yuna wiped her eyes. She had expected something else. A demand for tribute, perhaps. Or a claim of ownership. That was how the galaxy had always worked. The strong took from the weak, but humans were different. They had won the battle, and now they were offering to help without asking for anything in return. I don't understand, she admitted. You could rule this entire region. No one could stop you. Hannah laughed softly. Governor, humans spent thousands of years trying to rule each other. It never worked. Empires rise and fall. Tyrants come and go. In the end, people just want to live their own lives in peace. We learned that lesson the hard way. She walked to a console and pulled up a star map. Hundreds of systems were highlighted, the former territories of the Krell Dominion. Look at all these worlds. Each one has its own history, its own culture, its own dreams. What right do we have to tell them how to live? Our job is to protect them while they figure it out for themselves. Nothing more. The bridge was quiet. The crew of the Indomitable listened to their captain with pride in their eyes. This was why they served. Not for glory or conquest, but for moments like this. Taiho spoke up. Captain, I have to ask. You said this was just one ship, that you have 400 more like it. Is that true? Yes. Then why haven't humans conquered the galaxy themselves? With that kind of power, Hannah turned to face him directly. Because power is not the same as purpose. We could burn our way across the stars, but what would be the point? Dead worlds and broken species? An empire of ashes? That's not who we want to be. She placed a hand on his shoulder. My grandmother used to say that the true measure of strength is not what you can destroy, but what you choose to protect. We choose to protect. That's the difference between us and the Krell. That's why we won today. Yuna looked at this strange human woman, this warrior who spoke of compassion, this conqueror who refused to conquer. And she understood, finally, what made humanity special. It was not their weapons or their ships or their brutal efficiency in war. It was their choice. Despite all their power, despite all their history of violence, they chose to be kind. Captain Hannah, Yuna said, her voice steady now. On behalf of the people of Velum Prime, I thank you. And I want you to know that from this day forward, humanity will have no greater friend than us. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, we will be there. Hannah smiled. Then let's start building a better galaxy together. Outside the view screen, the stars burned bright against the darkness. And for the first time in 300 years, they no longer seemed cold. 6 months had passed since the battle. The galaxy had changed more in those 6 months than it had in the previous 3 centuries. The Krell Dominion was no more. Admiral Vorath had been taken to stand trial for his crimes against countless species. One by one, the worlds he had conquered declared their independence. Some chose to form new alliances. Others preferred to stand alone. All of them were free to decide their own fate. Human ships appeared throughout the former Dominion, but they were not warships. They were medical vessels, bringing doctors and supplies to populations that had been neglected for generations. They were engineering ships, helping to rebuild infrastructure that the Krell had destroyed. They were diplomatic vessels, mediating disputes between species that had forgotten how to talk to each other. Captain Hannah had been promoted to Admiral. She did not want the promotion, but Terran Command insisted. They needed someone to oversee the humanitarian mission, and no one was better suited than the woman who had started it all. She returned to Velum Prime on a cool autumn morning. The planet looked different now. New buildings rose where ruins had stood. Children played in parks that had once been refugee camps. The fear that had hung over everything was gone. Governor Yuna met her at the spaceport. The years of stress had faded from her face. She looked younger somehow, or perhaps just happier. "Admiral Hannah," she said warmly. "Welcome back. Please, just Hannah. The uniform doesn't change who I am." They walked together through the streets of the capital city. People recognized the human officer and stopped to wave. Some offered small gifts of food or flowers. Others simply bowed their heads in gratitude. "They remember what you did," Una explained. "They will never forget. I didn't do it alone. 140 crew members were on that ship with me, and they are all heroes in our history books. But you were the one who gave the order. You were the one who faced down Vorath and made him surrender. That means something." They reached a beautiful park in the center of the city. It had not existed 6 months ago. Now it was filled with trees and fountains and winding paths. In the center stood a large monument, a sculpture of a human battleship rising toward the stars. "We built this to honor your people," Una said. "Every child who grows up on Vellum Prime will see this monument and hear the story of how humanity saved us." Hannah stood before the sculpture in silence. She thought about the crew members she had lost in other battles over the years. The friends who had not lived to see this moment. The sacrifices that made days like this possible. "It's beautiful," she finally said. "There's an inscription." Una pointed to a plaque at the base of the monument. "We chose the words ourselves, but we wanted you to approve them." Hannah bent down to read the inscription. The words were simple. They came from a world of war. They chose to bring peace. They are human. For a long moment, Hannah could not speak. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "It's perfect," she managed. They sat on a bench near the monument, watching children play in the grass nearby. The sun was warm. The air smelled of flowers and fresh earth. "What will you do now?" Una asked. Hannah leaned back and looked up at the sky. "There's still so much work to be done. The freed species need time to rebuild. Some of them have been under Krell rule for so long that they don't remember how to govern themselves. We have diplomats and teachers helping them, but progress is slow. And the Krell themselves? They've withdrawn to their home system, as agreed. We have ships watching the borders, making sure they don't expand again. But honestly, I don't think they have any fight left in them." Vorath's defeat broke something in their spirit. Una nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll ever be a threat again?" "Maybe someday. Centuries from now. Empires fall and rise again. That's how history works." Hannah smiled slightly. "But by then, the galaxy will be different, stronger, united. The Krell won't find easy prey anymore." A little girl ran up to them, clutching a handmade drawing. She was perhaps 5 years old, with bright eyes and tangled hair. "Are you the human hero?" she asked, looking at Hannah with wonder. Hannah laughed. "I'm just a human. What's your name?" "Minji." "That's a beautiful name. Is that a drawing for me?" Minji nodded shyly and handed over the paper. It showed a crude but heartfelt image of a spaceship surrounded by stars and hearts. "Thank you." "Minji, I'll keep this forever." The girl beamed with pride and ran back to her parents, who watched from a distance with grateful smiles. Una watched the scene with warmth in her eyes. "That's why you fight, isn't it? For children like her. For the chance that they might grow up without fear." "Yes." Hannah folded the drawing carefully and put it in her pocket. "That's exactly why." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the peace of the moment. It seemed impossible that just 6 months ago, this world had been on the edge of destruction. Now, there was laughter and hope in life. "I've been thinking about something," Una said eventually. "The galaxy has been cruel for so long. Species fighting each other. Empires crushing the weak. It seemed like that was just how things worked. Like cruelty was the natural order. It doesn't have to be." I know that now. But before you came, I didn't believe it. I thought the strong would always prey on the weak. That kindness was just weakness in disguise. Yuna shook her head. You proved me wrong. You showed me that strength and compassion can exist together. Hannah turned to look at her. That's the hardest lesson humanity ever learned. We nearly destroyed ourselves before we understood it. Our history is full of monsters, Yuna. Tyrants and murderers and people who use their power to cause suffering. What changed? Nothing. And everything. Hannah sighed. We still have darkness in us. The capacity for violence and cruelty is part of what we are. But we learn to choose. To use our strength for protection instead of conquest. To fight only when there was no other option, and to show mercy when we could. She stood up and looked at the monument again. We're not perfect. We'll never be perfect. But we keep trying. Every generation tries to be better than the one before. That's all we can do. Yuna stood beside her. You've given us that chance too. The chance to try. To build something better. That's all I ever wanted. Above them, the TSS Indomitable hung in orbit, its scars repaired, its systems ready. Soon it would depart on a new mission, carrying Admiral Hada to another world that needed help. There were always more worlds that needed help, but for this moment, there was peace. Real peace. The kind that came not from the absence of war, but from the presence of hope. Children laughed in the park. Families gathered to enjoy the day. And in the hearts of everyone who saw the monument, a new belief took root. The galaxy did not have to be cruel. Kindness was not weakness. And somewhere among the stars, there were people who would fight for strangers, protect the innocent, and ask for nothing in return. They were human, and from this day forward, no tyrant would forget it.